not bad.
That's
So
warmer than it's been.
we can turn it on again.
In between Bible study and church,
And
you're
then,
up here.
yeah, I'll be up here.
You
And then
crank it on for 15 more minutes, and then we can do it while I'm doing a Bible study with her.
Yep.
It'll probably be.
My parents will be at the house already, but they were back in church this morning, so they've got all their car and stuff.
Skipping, huh?
They drove for the night.
Oh, so they'll be here at 10 o'clock?
Oh yeah, they'll probably.
Good morning. We're about ready to get started. By way of announcements, continue to pray for those that have long-term health challenges that they're facing. And I was just talking with Lori, and she's been getting some good news. Her creatinine levels have been coming down even before this last treatment she had. So a lot of positive things going on in her situation. Good to have Stephanie back with us, who's off ill for a little bit. Other than that, just keep remembering all those that are struggling. Anything else? Yeah.
This July, the Virginia Avenue Church of Christ is having their summer Bible camp in July the 7th to the 12th. If any children of the congregation or any teens would like to come, let me know. There's a link that's been posted on Facebook. They'll lead you to sign up to camp.
Okay, so if someone wants to participate in that Bible camp or something, see you?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's in July, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
I had a coworker, her husband, his name's Jason Hartman, has a lot of health issues going on. I think they're in their late 30s, like pretty serious. It sounds pretty serious issues that they're dealing with. Just to keep them in their prayers.
So this is a coworker of yours?
Coworker's husband, yeah. They have 3 kids, and I didn't get like the whole story, but it's like I don't know if it's like a pseudo cancer or like he's got like a pretty large mass in his abdomen and all kinds of stuff. So they were going through a tough time.
I hate when that kind of thing happens. So certainly prayers for Kaylee's coworker, with children involved and everything. That is just really sad things, and just pray that they're able to get a handle on that situation. Yeah, Susan.
Sort of similar, one of the families I work with, the husband and wife are both like 30 years old, and the husband was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney cancer. And yeah, so if you could pray, and they have 3 little children, so yeah, if you could put, really his name is Nick.
Nick.
Watterson, but, if you could pray for them, yeah, Nick Watterson.
I have prayers for Nick. You say he was 30 years old,
Young fellow, yeah.
and stage 4 kidney cancer. That's bad news there. So pray for that family. Anything else? Matt, would you come open us in a word of prayer?
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time, and just thank you for all the many blessings you've given us. And we take you for granted for everything you've given us sometimes and don't give you no credit. And just help us to 100% submit to you and your plan for us, and help us to quit trying to change everything. Be with all the ones mentioned and all the ones that need you spiritually, physically, or mentally, and give them what they need if it's your will. And Ben, as he delivers our lessons, and Brandon today, help us to take those and spread them out to other people. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Okay, we're in Hebrews chapter 11, sometimes called the Heroes of Faith chapter. And we're beginning with verse 12. It says, "Wherefore also there sprang of one, and him as good as dead, so many as the stars of heaven in multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore innumerable." So here the Hebrew writer is mentioning that they had already talked about Sarah well past the age where you would expect that she could have children, and now they're also bringing out the fact that even Abraham would have been past the age where you would have expected him to be able to father any children. But even though he was as good as dead, as so the Hebrew writer describes it, he was to be the father of as many as the stars of the heaven and multitude and the sand which is by the seashore. And that actually did happen. if you remember the various accounts of the tribes of Israel when they came out of Egypt, it was many hundreds of thousands. You know, you'll get different numbers if you look at different places and everything. Suffice to say, it was a large group of people that came out of Egypt in the Exodus, so it would have been innumerable in that regard. Okay, in verse 13 it says, "These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth." Now, these all is a reference not to Abel, Enoch, and Noah, which were mentioned before, because they didn't receive all the promises of the inheritance in Canaan and all that type thing that Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, and Jacob and their children did. But notice that these all died in faith. And I think that's the important thing for all of us to keep in mind. Whatever we do in this life, you know, when the time comes that we pass from this life to the next, it is very important that we be found in the faith. You know, one of the saddest things that I've heard about, I can't think of anyone in particular right now, but Larry told me of some folks he knew that had been faithful all their lives. And when they were literally in the home stretch, in the last part of their life, they fell away. I can almost think of nothing much more sad than that. Someone that dedicated years of their life to, you know, following God and trying to be a faithful servant, and then become weary and fall away toward the end. You know, dying in the faith it really does matter. If you look at Revelation chapter 14 and verse 13, it says, "Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord." And that's a statement of basically the same principle. You know, you can be faithful all of your life, but really you must die in the Lord. And it just shows that even with people that are faithful for a long time, Satan never gives up trying to get you. Maybe you've been doing good and fighting him off for 20 years, and he might let you alone for a little while, but he's thinking of a different way that he can come and attack you. Sometimes it might be through, you know, health issues, or it might be through other things, family fighting, all kinds of things. He can attack you and try to pull you away, even though you've been faithful for years. So we have to be wary. We have to be vigilant, because Peter tells us that Satan, like a roaring lion, walks around seeking who he can devour. So he's always out looking for who he can take out. You know, and I would suggest that that's one of the good reasons why it's just so important for us to always be around our brothers and sisters in Christ and be active, be engaged. Because even if you look in the animal world, the predators, who do they target? They don't target the main herd. They target the sickly ones that are outside, you know, that have isolated themselves. And Satan does the same thing. Yes?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, as Christians, we're the ones with the bullseyes on our back. Because folks who don't believe, or, maybe they're agnostic or atheist or whatever it is, they're already in the wrong, like they're in a not great place. They're not in a good place. But the Christians are the ones that, Satan wants to really pull away and ruin your testimony. And, but I think the one thing we have to remember is Christ is always there with his arms open saying, come back, you're welcome, and you can be forgiven of whatever as long as you're repentant. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that principle, Jesus even pointed that out, And some people even had some problems with it. Remember the parable where there was, people that went to work early in the day, and he said, I'll pay you this amount, and then people that went much later in the day, and he said the same thing, and they were complaining about that. He says, you're still getting the reward. But one of the things you can take from that is there are people that relatively late in the day still find their way. I mean, the classic example is the thief on the cross. I mean, the door to his life was effectively closing right as he was sneaking through the gate, so to speak. It's as long as you have the breath of life, you have an opportunity to try to change things. Anything else? Yeah, Roberta. It's on its way.
In their 90s, in their 90s and 100s when they had Isaiah, okay? Back in Genesis chapter 5, Adam was 800 years old, and he was having sons and daughters. Him and Eve was having, when they was 800 years old, and he died 930. So, I know Abraham and Sarah was old, but Abraham, can you imagine being Adam and Eve at 800 years old and having children?
No, I cannot. Yeah. No, I can't. It's good that younger people have children when they're younger. This is a good thing, because it's nice when you're grandparents and can take them for a while and have fun and then shift them back. That works. But, raising children it's not for the faint of heart. It's hard. But what I would say about Abraham, this verse says that he's dead, is that in the early days of the patriarchs, like Adam and Methuselah and all them, they did have longer lives. And whether it was something before the flood, a different way that people aged, I don't know. But after that, it seems like he put a cap on of around 100, 120 years, something like that. And so that people age differently, but that's getting into a lot of stuff. But you're right, Adam and Eve evidently had children for quite some time. It's just not specific. But I can't even imagine. I've actually thought about that, living for 800 or 900 years. Wow. Wow. That would be a lot. Okay. In verse 14, for they that say such things make it manifest that they are seeking after a country of their own. This verse shows that people like Abraham and Isaac, Jacob, and that realized that they were pilgrims. They were sojourners, so to speak. They were seeking after that country, but never felt like they had it here. Some other verses where you can see that is in Genesis chapter 47 and verse 9, where when Jacob appeared before Pharaoh, he said, the days of the years of my pilgrimage, sojournings is another way to, interpret that, are 130 years. And David, when he was king of Israel, in Psalms chapter 39, verse 12, he says, hear my prayer, O Lord, and give ear unto my cry. Hold not thy peace at my tears, for I'm a stranger with thee and a sojourner, all my fathers were. Some of the heroes of the Bible, I think, were able to achieve some of the great things they did And one of the primary reasons was they recognized that they were sojourners, they were on a pilgrimage, and this wasn't their home. I don't know if he recalls it, but a long time ago, Steve and I had a conversation where for many people, especially in the modern world, now back in the 1800s and that, it was tougher. Life was a lot harder. They didn't have quite all the pain medications and all the other things to make life easier. They didn't have the TV set for instant entertainment and everything. But now, for at least some people, at least the more prosperous people, it's almost like a heaven on earth for them. And I remember us talking about that. And their heaven is sort of here until they get a lot older. They want to build their castles here because life can be pretty pleasant and pretty nice if they have a lot of, resources to do all the things that they want. It can be pretty nice. And they're not really sojourners. They're happy to camp out right here and build their treasures here. And Jesus even talked about that. People tend to build up their treasure like the man that had the barns that he built to hold all his goods. That's the mindset. And when you have the mindset of building up treasure here, it becomes real difficult to have the correct mindset of being a pilgrim or a sojourner heading toward that city that God has made. And then things like, and this is my opinion, but that's when things like covetousness and materialism start entering in. It's because you first haven't realized that you're a sojourner and all these things that you're building up, you're not going to keep them anyway. I think I mentioned before, in fact, I'd be surprised if I hadn't, the black preacher that one time said that he had yet to see a U-Haul, after a hearse, and I think that's exactly the case. We can't take any of these things with us. The only real thing that you can store up in heaven is your friends and family members and people you come in contact with, that their souls ultimately end up in heaven. That's the treasures you can store up. Other than that, you can't take anything. And so you have to get this idea, that your ultimate home is not here. But boy, that's hard though. That's hard. Because I find myself struggling with those kinds of things too. The here and now, you just keep doing things and building things, and it's easy to get caught up in that. And I think that wars against your spirituality if you don't have the pilgrim sojourner mindset. Any thoughts or comments? Yeah, Steve. Comes on its way.
Sometimes as we get older, we get to the point that we are convinced that we're not going to live forever.
I understand that.
Younger people don't see their mortality as much as older people do, I don't think. And that's a danger for them because things happen. And as you get older, you might want to put your house in order, but if you wait too long, it may happen so quickly that you didn't get a chance. But older people sometimes put it off too, so I don't know. I don't know why, but just a thought.
Yeah, well, that's right. As you put a few years under your belt, life has a way of reminding you from time to time that you're just not quite as, you're not able to do all the things you once could. I had a friend, and I really liked his comment. He talked about he had hurt himself, and he didn't. I said, "Well, how'd that happen?" He said, "I don't know. I went to bed and woke up and found out that I'd hurt myself overnight." And I think that sometimes is the way it is. You know, as you get older, you get reminded that you definitely have a finite period of time. You know, with younger people, I'll be with you in a second, Susan, and I know Chris will appreciate this because he knows and Randy as well. There's a song I really like by a band called Pink Floyd. It's called Time, and it talks about people when they're younger tend to fritter away time and have an offhand manner at the way they deal with their life. And then one day they suddenly realize, wow, where did it all go? And that's the message of that song. And I think it's true because young people, at least I did, you tend to have this, yeah, I know it's going to happen. Intellectually, you know. Intellectually, you know that you're going to die someday. You get older and have stickers on your chest and different things like that. You emotionally finally begin to accept it. And I think that's what Steve is talking about. At some point, you internalize, yeah, I really am going to leave this life. And I think that can be helpful. But on the other hand, I've seen people, like you said, that never seem to learn the lesson. And you see it in healthcare, and I'm sure Kaylee could. I watched a guy that literally had half his throat taken out, and he's smoking a cigarette like this outside the hospital. You know, and you would think that you'd learn, you know, that didn't help you out, you know. But it is Susan, and then back to Steve.
Yeah, I think, you know, also because we live in America and we have been so blessed in this country, I mean, we have a lot. You know, even the poorest of Americans, you know, you can have a roof over your head and, you know, public housing, you know, it's even that, it's nice. Like, you know, I just helping people move and, you know, so here's the thing, like whenever you're living in a third world country and you don't have much and you're literally living day to day and depending on God for like, okay, where's the next meal going to come from, Lord? And you know, you've got a mud hut with like dirt floors. I think that causes you to be a lot more dependent on God. Whereas here in America, it's like, well, you know, we have what we need. Yeah, we're all good. You know, yeah, we do. Like we're really blessed in this nation. And I think it's really easy to take it for granted. So, you know, just having like a different view of, I think that's why a lot of people, like you said, you know, they think, well, you know, I can build my heaven down here, but this isn't really what it's all about. Yeah. You know, it's going to be like so much better there. And like I think probably the people here preach into the choir here in this room, but you know, but folks out there that are living a great life, you know, because America gives everybody the opportunity to do well if they work hard. But yeah, I mean, it's just a different perspective.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I think our forefathers and people in the third world countries like Honduras and places like that, they are closer. They live on the edge, so to speak. They're closer. They understand. And I think that's why Jesus talked about, you know, how it's difficult for people that are wealthy, you know, to find heaven. You know, it'd be easier to go through an eye of a needle, and you can debate what they meant by all that. But the idea is being wealthy here and having lots of blessings here tends to cause materialism and covetousness, and it wars against a proper attitude of being a sojourner and everything. And I think that's what Jesus was implying. Not that wealthy people cannot go to heaven. It's more difficult because this life isn't challenging them quite as much. And I think there's something to that. There was an elder I knew one time years ago, and he said something that at the time didn't register with me, but now I know what he meant. He said he was so glad that he was neither wealthy nor attractive because he didn't think that he would have been able to handle either temptation, and it might have caused him to fall away. And I thought, yeah, I get that. So sometimes when we don't have things, be careful what they say, be careful what you wish for, because I've seen wealth destroy people, you know. God blessed them, and it caused them to fall away. I've seen it. So, any other thought? Yes, Steve.
I think that another side of this is as people get older, they don't understand, some people don't understand grace. And forgiveness. And they look at their lives and they say, I'm just not good enough. And so they don't change because they're not good enough. You know, that's, if they were saved, that would be too good for them.
I think
And-
there's
and
something
so-
to that, because by definition, the longer you live, the more times you've made mistakes. And you have more to remember. Oh, I did that. No, I did that too. Yeah, go ahead.
And I think that if you look at some of these people in this list of people with faith, that you'll find that they weren't perfect. In fact, many of them were far from perfect and committed sins that were practically unforgivable in our way of thinking. And yet, they are listed as people of faith. And so God is willing to forgive if we turn. And I think that's a lesson for all of us, is that we are not stuck where we are, that we can become people of faith, and God is willing to forgive.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. One of the people I look to, and it's just not my opinion, we have God himself said that David was a man after his own heart. That's God saying that, not me. David was an adulterer. He was a murderer. He lied to a whole nation for a couple years until Nathan came, covering up what he did. And some of the other things I was really bothered by, he went and wiped out villages, lying to that other king. That means kids too. There's a lot going on there. And yet, he was able to turn from all that. I don't think any of us has done that stuff, right? At least I don't know of it. We've messed some things up. I don't think we've done all that. And yet he was still able to find grace. So Steve's right. I think I've actually ran into some people like this I've tried to study with. What's the use mentality? I cannot do this. I'm just not good enough. I won't be good enough. And that's actually right. Apart from Christ, you can't be good enough and you won't be good enough. It's when we turn and try to trust him and say, I'm handing it over. I'm going to really put my best effort to doing it your way, and then trust him to make up the difference. And some of us trust that better than others do. One of the best analogies I've ever heard for it is, some people naturally just trust grace more easily than others. And the story I heard to illustrate that, I think it was Clarence that told me this one time, because I tend to be one of those ones that are more nervous about stuff, you know. And he said there was a couple guys, they were freezing, and they were lost in the Canadian wilderness, and they came out to the edge of this lake, and they saw a cabin across the way with the lights on, and to them it was salvation, you know. And the one guy just started darting off across the lake, and the other guy says, man, the ice, you might go through, you know, you gotta be careful. But he just ran across because he's cold and wanted to get over there. The other guy was there with a stick testing and went slower. You know, one guy was more confident. The other guy was more tentative and more nervous about it. Both of them made it across, though. What was it? It was the ice. The ice held them up, you know, and it wasn't their attitude toward it, but I think grace works that way too. Grace is there for people that are totally comfortable with it, others that are more nervous types. I think God deals with that and realizes that we're all different that way. Other thoughts? Oh, Scott.
So back to the time subject there, that's a human concept. You know, we apply it to our lives, we have time, lots of time. So I challenge everyone here to go home, multiply how many years you are by 12, then multiply that by 4, and that's how many Sundays you've lived. Then subtract how many years you wasted, and then subtract how many, or just add together how many you think you have left. So if you live to 80 years old, you have 3,840-ish Sundays. If you waste the first 20, you already only have 2,880. And every Sunday is clicking away just that fast. It's a human concept. We think we have time. But if you start to separate that and put it in its own boxes, you know, how many years did it take me to be a Christian? How many years did it take me to become, you know, successful at being, you know, thriving to be a Christian? How many times have I wasted a Sunday or a Wednesday or a Sunday evening or not gone to something I knew that I should have or would have benefited? You find that there's a lot more in the wasted column than there is that you have invested.
No, there's no doubt that's true. And that concept was actually put forth one time in I read C.S. Lewis. Now, he's not a Christian in the sense that we think of it. I forget what he was, some denomination in England. Anglican? Yeah. But boy, he is a smart guy to read. And I was first introduced to him down at Freed Hardman, you know, with some of his works down there that we studied, Mere Christianity. I recommend that book to everybody because it helps you see sin in yourself that normally you don't understand as sin, but it's good. And he had another book called The Screw Tape Letters where an older devil was counseling a younger devil and how to get at people. You know, and one of the things he says, just make them believe they've got more time. You know, because the younger devil was complaining, I can't get him to do any spectacular failure. And the older devil said, no, you don't want that. Because if there's some spectacular failure, it might wake them up. No, just let them have a slow, gradual descent downward, that they don't see any signposts, don't see any warnings. He says that's the safest, securest way to get the person you're responsible for to hell. That guy's smart. He gets it. Because sometimes Satan just subtly works on us and we just start drifting. I don't know. Steve, Pat, Ruthie, if everyone that ever came through the doors here that was baptized was here, it'd be a lot. And not all of them have moved or passed away. Many have just drifted on. What happened was, I don't remember a lot of spectacular failures that were in a newspaper or anything like that. No, it's just the subtle pressures of life just drifted away. That's why you have to be alert, you have to be vigilant. You know, Paul even talked about that he buffeted himself daily so that even after he had preached to others that he would not become a castaway. It's real. It happens all the time. Yeah, Susan.
Because I really like C.S. Lewis too. He actually started thinking about the concept for that book, that the Screw Tape Letters, during a particularly boring sermon at church one Sunday. I thought that was really funny. They wrote that in his
I've heard those. You know, I've actually put people to sleep. I know.
But without the boring sermon, we wouldn't have the book.
There you go. That's why I guess there's a place for it, you know. Then it goes on in verse 15, and if indeed they had been mindful of that country from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. Now think about what this is saying. It basically says that the patriarchs, they were volunteers to go on this journey, this sojourning, that they signed up for it, if you will. And I'm going to suggest that all of you did too. You signed up to be here. You know, you volunteered to do this. And we all have the option, hopefully nobody takes it, we all have the option to go back. It says they could have went back to where they came from, the country from which they had gone out. They could have chosen to go back, but by faith they hung in there. And I'm going to suggest to you that that's what we would all counsel you to do as well. Because there's going to be times where the world's going to be trying to call you back. You know, oh, didn't you have more fun back in the day, you know? And boy, it'd be nice to not have to do this or that. And the world's constantly trying to do that. You know, I'm sometimes amazed at some of these young mothers that get their children up and go through all the things, getting them ready to come to church and that type thing, you know, and it's not always easy. You know, sometimes it's hard, but the rewards in the long term are much greater. So keep those things in mind. Any thought or comment, and we'll go ahead and close. Yeah. Lori.
I should have made this comment earlier when you were talking about getting older, and I think a lot of people, when you're younger, I think you're kind of afraid to read the Bible because you think all those people are perfect. But the older you get and you do read, and you think, wow, they're just like us. You know what I mean? They're human and they made mistakes, and
yeah, you do, as you get older, you realize, you begin to understand, and sometimes we even think, boy, that sounds like a lot of fun. Wait a second, I've been there and done that, and it wasn't as much fun as I remember. And TV even fools you, you know? Like, they'll show these beach parties and stuff with people drinking and everything else, and that people that was drinking back when I watched them didn't have six-pack stomachs. I don't remember that, what they show on TV. I don't remember that at all. I remember the opposite. You know, so sin is a big lie. Always has been, always will be. But it's put out there in front of us, and one of the big lies is like Scott told about is, oh, you got so much more time. No problem. No, you don't. Boy, it slips by. Anything else? Okay, thanks.